Everyone. When it comes to Los Angeles Lakers, Talen Horton Tucker is the one asset that they have to try to upgrade their team. The Lakers are trying to acquire some trades, and of course they want a Kyrie Irving. But whether they get Kyrie or not, there are other smaller moves that they could make in order to upgrade the team and, a smaller micro growth type of move. And I imagine the Lakers are going to explore several possibilities. Now, THT has been linked to the Raptors in the past, the Utah Jazz. They're a rebuilding team. There's talks about, maybe a Patrick Beverley trade, something along those lines. And the Lakers have kind of dangled THT to various teams. Some teams are interested, some teams not so much. But regardless, the goal is if you're going to trade him, you trade him for a piece that can help you now and maybe potentially in the future. They don't want to just give up THT just to give up THT. Hey, here's a kid that was younger than half the people drafted in this last draft, who, yes, I understand many people think he's not a star, he'll never be a star, or, he'll never be a great player. But you got to keep in mind, the beginning of last season, before the season began, he broke his shooting hand, which affects everything. Your dribbling, your passing, your defense, your shot, everything. So who knows the type of player that he could grow? He's still extremely young. If he was just drafted this year, many people would be looking at him as like, oh man, we got an absolute steal. But because people look at him as like he's been in the league for several years, therefore he's never going to amount to anything, I think is a little silly. But the idea is in Lakers trading him also is he has an option that he could pick up. And if he has a great season, then it's very likely that he's going to decline that option and then request bigger money. And then at that point, do the Lakers do that? If he has a terrible season, then he probably opts into his option, and the Lakers are kind of in a bad spot. So the thought process is you're kind of in a situation that could potentially be a lose-lose unless he just plays so well, and then at the trade deadline, maybe you could flip him for something because the team would really like it. But you're better off just kind of trading him now if that's the thought process and the idea, and trying to acquire some talent. Now, obviously, Patrick Beverley is the player that's been linked. He would fit perfectly next to LeBron as that guard. Doesn't need the ball in his hands, is going to play that nuanced defense and just be a nuisance to everybody, right? He's going to be that guy that will be your enforcer. He's the guy that'll get the technical, that'll get in somebody's face, that, is just a pain in the butt if you're playing against him, but you love to have him on your team. He has a great solid shot, but he's older in age, he's only getting up there. So do you want to trade a young talent for a guy like Patrick Beverley? However, Patrick Beverley is an expiring contract. Patrick Beverley has said in the past he would love to play for the Lakers. He'd love to play with LeBron. So that's always a possibility. He's not going to cost much because Utah, even if they don't trade Donovan Mitchell, probably don't care if they keep him or not. So you could probably get him for peanuts, pennies on the dollar. But is THT really worth trading for him when you have a young talent? Patrick Beverley, maybe you have for 2 to 3 years at most, assuming he plays well for you and then you re-sign him. Is he a guy that you want for your long-term plans? And what would his trade value be in the future? Even if you re-sign him. Obviously, if you let him go, clear cap space, you're in a good position. But Lakers have plenty of cap space next season, assuming they don't make any trades that affect that cap space, which I don't think they will. But as of right now, you essentially have like Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, and THT potentially, and that's it. So you have like 80 to potentially 100 million in cap space next season, which the Lakers have been adamant in preserving. But a guy like Patrick Beverley could make a lot of sense. Patrick Beverley also fits with another player that is very similar to LeBron, which we'll touch on in a second. But the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks have a decision to make with Tim Hardaway Jr., right? Tim Hardaway Jr. is a solid veteran player, but he's still very young. He's only 30 years old. He's 6'6", wing guard combo. He's a guy that can knock down some shots. He's a little sporadic and inconsistent at times, but he is a guy that can, put up points. He's a solid defender. He's not the greatest defender in the world, but he's a guy that at least tries, can be a solid contributor, a solid defender. But you get the high IQ veteran presence with him. There's a lot of concerns, though, because he's coming off of a serious injury. And the question is, how will he how will he be able to perform given the injury? Is he going to be a guy that can contribute, or is he a guy that's going to take some time to really pick back up and get back in? Now, he too is an expiring contract. So, if you're the Dallas Mavericks, you don't really have much to lose. If he ends up not really working out this year, maybe you bring him off the bench or you slowly bring him in. But Dallas was just in the Western Conference Finals. So they're trying to compete now. They're trying to get back there and then to an NBA Finals. You saw the acquisition of Christian Wood, which I think is super underrated and a lot of people aren't really talking about, which surprises me. They also got JaVale McGee, which I think is another great pickup, another undervalued player that is really going to help this Dallas Mavericks team. And Tim Hardaway Jr., beyond him, you have a bunch of guys that are very similar to Tim Hardaway Jr. So do you have that need to keep him around, or would you be better off trading him this season if the right deal comes along? And that's where these three teams could potentially meet up and team up for a potential 3-team trade. Now, a NBA exec, of course, the reports where an NBA exec throws out this idea and all 3 teams should put it together, but you don't know who the NBA exec is. Nonetheless, thought it was an interesting trade idea, and I thought I'd share it here on the channel. But basically, what you're seeing is a 3-team trade between the Jazz, the Mavericks, and the Lakers. So THT would be going to the Jazz. You'd have Patrick Beverley going to the Dallas Mavericks, which that's where Luka comes in, that I mentioned earlier, the guy who's very similar to LeBron, that Patrick Beverley would fit very nicely next to. So he would be a solid fit. Yes, you're losing the height, but you're getting a guy that can play, can be that enforcer. You're not losing the defense. You could make an argument that Patrick Beverley is a better defender, so you're actually upgrading defensively. He shoots just as good, if not better, than Tim Hardaway Jr. So that would be a solid move for Dallas. And then the Lakers would get a guy in Tim Hardaway Jr. that is a, high risk, or high reward, low risk type guy. Like, you're getting him, it's aspiring contract, so you're not messing up with the salary space. If he can kind of get back into form and get back to being that guy, he could be your starting, shooting guard, which would be very solid, or even your starting, small forward if LeBron's playing point guard, something like that. Because that's the big question, is who is going to be filling in that slot? Because you imagine it's going to be Westbrook or Kyrie or whatever, but let's just say the team that they have right now, Westbrook, whoever the shooting guard is, LeBron, Anthony Davis, and then probably Thomas Bryant. Now, Austin Reeves, maybe, Walker, Troy Brown Jr., those are kind of the thought processes that immediately come to mind. Those are the players that immediately come to mind. But Tim Hardaway Jr. would be lights, head and away, your starting shooting guard for this team. Like, that would be perfect. You have him slot in at the 2 spot. You get that defense. You get that shooting. He would immediately be one of the best shooters on the team. And, he's not the greatest shooter in the world, but he still has a higher average than almost every player on the team, not named like Kendrick Nunn. And I think he shot similar to LeBron James. I'd have to look at his last stats, but he is a solid shooter. He's a solid veteran, but he's also younger than Patrick Beverley. He's only 30 years old. So you get a guy that's younger that can help sort of with the age that you have with your team, with your roster. He's a guy, if it works out, you can re-sign and kind of keep around for the long haul. Now, there could be some other moving parts, but this is essentially the core of the trade. These 3 guys going to respectable teams. And then if you're the Jazz, Talen, Horton, Tucker, you're a rebuilding team. Makes sense to take him, kind of use him to grow with your roster, and then whatever you do with Donovan Mitchell, stuff like that. But having Patrick Beverley next to Luka would give Luka that enforcer, that guy that is, because Luka's had an issue with refs and getting texts and things like that. So it would probably help him to have a guy like Patrick Beverley who could kind of take the fall and be that voice for Luka in many ways. He also is, again, that guy that is just an annoying defender that you hate to play against, but you love to have him on your team. I think he would fit great with the Dallas Mavericks. That culture, Jason Kidd, I think would welcome and embrace Patrick Beverley. I mean, this is Jason Kidd who asked a player with the Brooklyn Nets to bump him so he could spill water on the court so they could get a free timeout. Keep that in mind. So if you think, no way Jason Kidd would love Patrick Beverley, of course he would. Patrick Beverley is Jason Kidd, just not as good. And so I think that would work out perfectly. You don't lose the shooting. You probably, again, upgrade defensively, in my opinion. And having Luka, Beverly, you got JaVale McGee, and Christian Wood, I think is a solid 4. And then you have everyone else kind of compete for that small forward position spot. There you go. Patrick Beverley, just like he'd be a great fit next to LeBron James, would be a great fit next to Luka. Doesn't need the ball in his hands, isn't going to complain, is going to show up to work every day, do his job. He knows his role. He knows what he needs to do. And I think he would fit right in with the Dallas Mavericks. I think Dallas would love Patrick Beverley on this team. And I think he would be a guy that can knock down shots, could really help take this team to the promised land like they're trying to get to. I mean, they made nice little upgrades, nice little changes to their team and their roster, and I think Patrick Beverley is a positive in that direction. If it doesn't work out, he's a free agent, and you just let him walk. You're not losing anything financially by trading Tim Hardaway Jr. for Patrick Beverley. And then, for the Lakers side, again, like I said, LeBron gets that guy who can high IQ, play some defense. Again, not the best defender in the world, but he's got the size, he's got the skills, hopefully he maintains the athleticism. If he can stay healthy, he could be a real contributor on this Laker team. Again, we're not talking about the big blockbuster moves here. We're just talking about little small moves that are achievable that actually help upgrade the team. Tim Hardaway Jr. is that guy. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a guy that would really help the Lakers. If it doesn't work out, again, you let him go. If it does work out, you can re-sign him, get him on a new contract, maybe a more team-friendly contract, and you're in a good position. I think he'd fit in beautifully with Darvin Ham's 4-out, 1-in offense. He's going to be part of that team defense, which Darvin Ham really wants him to do. I just think he's immediately an upgrade over everyone else you have that could be your shooting guard. He's still young enough at 30 years old where you could still have him for the next 5 years if you want. He's still going to have some trade value if he gets back into the swing of things. If he can get back to being that solid veteran in this league, he's a guy that, 2 years from now, if you need to rebuild or you need to get some assets or you just want to move off of him and, clear some cap space for somebody else, whatever, he's a guy that's going to be easily moved. He's a guy that you're going to be able to acquire, but still be able to flip later on down the line. And you're not going to have to give up any other assets, right? A team, a contending team would be more than happy to take on Tim Hardaway Jr., assuming he's back to what we've seen with him in the past, which he's been a very solid contributor. He was great with the Knicks. He's been great with Dallas, pre-injury. So I think that this would be a win-win for all sides because the Dallas Mavericks get Patrick Beverley, who would fit, I think, seamlessly with that team. Lakers get their starting shooting guard. Again, health is a big factor, but hopefully missing the season, kind of getting his body, his mind right, stuff like that. He can come in. You get your starting guy. You get your guy you can count on that can hit shots, that can play defense, that can do a little bit of everything for you. That's what you want. That's what you need. And then if you're the Utah Jazz, you get a guy, you're flipping Patrick Beverley, who is just kind of a throw-in in a trade for a THT, a young player, a young asset that you can kind of use to build for your future. THT would be great for them, because he would have time to develop and grow. He wouldn't have the pressure of being a Laker and having to contribute immediately. He could kind of come into his own and be a solid guy. He was a solid defender. He's got like a 7-foot wingspan for his size, which is incredible. He's a guy that if healthy, can be a real key player. Worst case, you're getting a rotation guy, but you're not losing anything by giving up Patrick Beverley. If you're the Utah Jazz, you do this 10 times out of 10. But the Lakers didn't want to give up THT for Patrick Beverley because they're looking at it as like, Patrick Beverley's old. We only have him for so long. He's not that big of an upgrade. He probably starts, but, depending on the situation, if we go get Kyrie, stuff like that. Well, if you get Tim Hardaway Jr., even if you go get Kyrie, you could still slot Tim Hardaway Jr. right next to him. I mean, Kyrie Irving, Tim Hardaway Jr., LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Thomas Bryant is an incredible team. That is great. You have the youth, you have the skills, you have the shooting, you have the defense, you have everything. What more could you ask for? That would be a great starting five for this Lakers team. And you still have all of your key pieces that just signed this offseason and little moves, the Kendrick Nuns, guys like that. I just think that this would be a huge deal for the Lakers. I think this would be great for the Jazz because you're getting a young talent. And then again, for Dallas, they're getting a veteran guy, a locker room presence guy, a guy that comes to work. He knows his job. He knows his role. You need guys like that. He's not going to come in and he's not going to want to be the star. He's not going to want, 15 shots a game or anything like that. He could care less if he takes one shot or he takes 10 shots. That's what you need if you're Dallas. A guy that can come in, play some solid defense, help this team out. I think Patrick Beverley, for what the Dallas Mavericks are. I don't think Patrick Beverley, I'm not saying Patrick Beverley is a better player than Tim Hardaway Jr., but for what Dallas has in the team that they are constructed, I think Patrick Beverley is a better fit than Tim Hardaway Jr. personally. I think you get the shooting, but you get an upgraded defense. You get that pest. You get that guy that could kind of be the enforcer for Luka and have Luka's back and get the technical so Luka doesn't have to. I think that is huge. And you get a guy that doesn't care about, you never have to pass him the ball if you don't want to. He doesn't care. He's happy to just show up and do his job. I think that is huge. But as always, I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think of this trade? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you somewhere in between? Do you agree like it's a fair trade for everybody? Lakers get their starting shooting guard. The Mavs get their point guard, quote unquote, next to Luka, and then the Jazz get a young player and Talen Horton Tucker. I think that is a move that doesn't affect anything for the Lakers, right? It doesn't. It's not going to stop the Kyrie trade or even the Buddy Hield Miles Turner trade or anything like that. And you're getting your starting shooting guard. Even if you do the Buddy Hield and Miles Turner deal, I still don't think Buddy Hield is going to start for this team. Again, you're in the same boat. Who's your starting shooting guard? Tim Hardaway Jr. immediately becomes your starting shooting guard. I mean, seriously, if your starting five is, let's say, worst case scenario, Westbrook, Tim Hardaway Jr. Westbrook would be traded in the deal, so never mind. You'd have LeBron, let's say. You'd have Tim Hardaway Jr. You have, say, Walker or Brown. You have Anthony Davis and Miles Turner. That's a pretty good starting five. Again, not a contender, but it's still it's better than it was right now, currently constructed. But again, however you feel about it, I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.